Toxic masculinity, right? Does it exist? We live?
Live.
We live. Welcome back to the Opinion Factory podcast, the podcast for free thinkers and challenge seekers.
Yes, sir.
I'm Khelil.
I'm Alex.
And you may have heard this term before, right? It used to be known as macho, tough guy, chauvinist, even player, you know what I'm saying? But in the 1980s, a new form of that term was coined called toxic masculinity. You may have heard of it in 2020, all right? It was coined during the mythopoetic men's movement. And what it means has been very hard to pin down. Not so much because of the toxic part. We all understand what that means, right? But so much so because of the masculinity part, which has been a lot harder to define. But is commonly accepted as, the traits that are encouraged in men that also encourage violence and sexual harassment, and qualities that hurt men themselves and society at large. And that's the background of toxic masculinity, right? Does it exist? There's been a little bit of a debate back and forth. And I remember last year, if you guys remember, Gillette came out with this commercial. I think it said the best a man can be instead of the traditional, the best a man can get. And it was railing on toxic masculinity. It had all these depictions of men being bad. And it seemed to indicate that what it means to be a man, as we understand it, is bad. It showed positive images of men at the end, when men were stepping in to save the kid from being bullied. And when men were stopping the boys from roughhousing each other, saying, hey, we don't treat each other like this. Right? But what they portrayed that as was something separate from what it is accepted as to be a man. Now, they had a point, but I think their execution is very, very poor because they were right. Correct me if I'm wrong. You, Alex, and people at home, they were right. What it means to be a man is not being aggressive. It's not being dominant. It's not being a sexual harasser. You know what I'm saying? It's not being entitled. It's being protective. It's being a provider. It's being many things. You know I'm getting with this?
I do, but then you could argue the dominance thing, though. It's not being the dominant thing, like being the dominant guy in the room or being the dominant figure. You're the head of the household. Is that not part of that
there is
manhood thing too, though?
There is a certain authority that is traditional when it comes to being masculine. But this is my opinion here at the Opinion Factory, all right? Masculinity does not come with the entitlement of that authority. That authority is earned. It's accepted by those around you, and if they don't accept it, you can't force it upon them.
You can't. But I'm not saying you need to be a man. You need to have a freaking a Ford F-450. You don't need to have a big ass pickup truck. But then you see a dude coming out a Prius or a freaking a little hatchback. People gonna look at him funny.
People gonna look at him funny.
Girls look at him funny too.
Yeah, but
that's what kind of man drives this car? How many girls are supposed to get a car like that?
I'm glad you brought that up because that movement that I referred to, the mythopoetic men's movement back in the 1980s, they coined the term toxic masculinity, which a lot of people I think don't know. They think feminists coined that term 2006 or something, but it wasn't. It was this movement, and the reason they came up with it was that it was the traits that they defined was in response to men feeling powerless due to the furthering of the feminist agenda in society that was removing the traditional masculine authority. They felt more and more powerless, more and more helpless, and they coined the term toxic masculinity as the things that define how they lashed out, how they reacted to the removal of what they saw as, their traditional role, their gender role, so to speak. And we've already spoken about how important gender roles are in relationships. And
Gender
now
roles in what sense though? Like
if you take a
what have they
man's
stripped away? That's why that's why I'm
if you
curious.
take a man's role as a protector and a provider in a family structure, and you remove that, even though he doesn't want it to be removed, right? Even though he doesn't want to be, seen as, the stay-at-home dad, which is nothing wrong with that. But let's say he doesn't want to be seen as that. Let's say he doesn't want to be seen as the nurturer. He wants to be seen as a provider and all that stuff. If society is now pushing him towards accepting that role, and is now unacceptable for him to be what he actually naturally wants to be and what he actually naturally is, then he starts feeling powerless. Then he starts.
Where do you get that naturally from though? That's the like. Are you arguing that men are more like what are more men naturally?
Well, that goes into what masculinity is.
All right, keep going.
Naturally, men and women are different. And a lot of people accept the fact that naturally men provide, protect, women nurture, women communicate, women bond.
Yeah, but isn't
Naturally.
that like I'm not saying that's toxic, but isn't that what they're trying to break down when they get rid of gender roles though? Like this is where I'm kind of say I'm on the fence
they want to take someone's role and switch it without their. Well, I'm assuming this is what the movement was fighting against, right? I know that the movement coined this term, but from what I understood as to why they coined it is that they felt they had their powers taken away. They felt powerless because their roles were being stripped away, and they were being forced into roles that they did not want and that they didn't actually fit into.
No one was forced him to be a stay-at-home dad, though.
No, but now it was becoming socially unacceptable to be like a voice of authority in your own household.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I feel like if someone said they were the head of the household, that wouldn't be an issue. Like if a guy
If someone said what?
If a guy said I run my house, I don't feel like that would be an issue.
If a guy said no, it's not an issue. But I'm saying back then, that's what the movement was fighting against. Whether they were right or whether they were wrong, they felt like they had their powers being stripped away.
All right. So what do you think?
I'm not saying I agree with them. I'm saying that's where the term.
What do you think it means? What do you think it means right now then?
To be like toxic masculinity?
Yeah. Like, what's the definition you give right now?
The definition I would give right now, I don't even like the term, much less finding a definition for.
Because I feel like a lot of these people that rail against us are like, it's that manly man type bravado that we try to force kids to like men don't cry, and men can wear pink and like shit like that. I feel like that's what they're like trying.
And in turn, that kid turns into someone who represses all his emotions and ends up shooting the school up.
Yeah, and I think
they've actually attributed school shootings to toxic masculinity, haven't they?
Yeah, and I feel like that's where the term came from. Like those really aggressive, macho people can't express any emotions. Can't. What was the example I had? Like they just can't. They don't have a space to say how they really feel about things.
Right, but that doesn't make them masculine, though. And those aren't masculine traits. I feel like this term comes from a misunderstanding of what masculinity actually is and what it's supposed to be.
Which is fair, but here's the thing: like, where do we get any of these terms from? Is what's passed down from society, like traditionally passed down from people before us, and then what we see in like the media, like movies and TV and all that type of stuff. Well, so when you have think about who the high school jock is, right? The popular guy in high school. Like he's a manly guy. He has the girlfriend. He's the captain of the football team.
We know he's a manly guy. How? Because he has
the way it's presented. He has the girlfriend. He has the hot girlfriend, right?
Right. Who's telling us this though? Society, right? Yeah. They're saying this is what makes a man a man.
Yeah. Think about every movie you've seen, bro. Any movie you've seen about any kids in high school, whatever. It could be High School Musical. It could be freaking, a show, Friday Night Lights. It could be whatever type of movie or show you want. The popular guy is usually the guy who's the jock and has a bad girlfriend.
I agree.
So when that popular guy also exhibits the traits of, screaming and being aggressive and whatever, it's like, oh, this is how you be a man. Maybe it's not as direct as that, but subconsciously you're putting in those layers of like, oh, you want the bad girlfriend, you want to be the popular guy, you want to be the head honcho of wherever you're at. This is what you got to do.
You have to act this way. Yeah. Right.
And so that's why I'm thinking it's coming from.
Right. And people who feed into that don't really understand. Like I watch that stuff and I recognize that it's a movie because in real life, think about it. You're in high school and there's a jock and all of a sudden dudes start wilding out, being mad aggressive. And what the fuck you say to me, bro? I'll go right now. I'll take you right now, bro. Step outside. What does that say to you? That dude is mad insecure, bro. He's not a, like, all that says to me is insecure. Like, people who understand what masculinity is and what it's supposed to be recognize that those things that they call toxic masculinity isn't masculinity at all. It's insecurities, I think. And the dangers in saying that, you know, this is what it means to be masculine. And so this is why we should be teaching our boys that it's okay to not be, you know, the manly man, the masculine man, that it's okay to get in touch with the feminine side, is now you're feminizing these boys. You're probably making them suppress who they naturally are. You know what I mean? Because, like I said before, men and women are different. Women are much more communicative. I think there was a study that said women speak, like, 30,000 words in one day, and men speak 5,000. They express themselves more.
Is that because of how we're taught, though?
Exactly. And it has nothing to do with the fact that this is what it means to be a man. It's not a trait. It's a societal failure. It's a cultural failure. It's a family structure failure. It's a teaching failure. It's not that being masculine is bad. And when you portray it the way Gillette did, I say masculinity is bad, and the way a lot of people portray it is that now you're misrepresenting what masculinity is, and now you're eliminating gender roles, which I think is necessary, and you're pushing people, men in particular, boys in particular, into being more feminine. To what end?
But here's the thing, though. You can say it's a failure on society and the culture or whatever, but if it's always been that way, then that's what's gonna become the new definition of masculinity, is it not, though?
If it's always been that way, you think it's always been that way?
Or if it has been that way for a long period of time. Not if it's always been, but a long period of time, you know? Like, if men have been the provider in Western societies because they were the only ones allowed to work for most of the years, right?
Right.
So if that's the case and they're the provider, they're the head of the household, they're whatever. Now you move forward, and like as you move forward, that's
providing monetarily.
Yeah, and just providing for the household. That's what's gonna become masculinity, though. It's social masculinity. So as you move, so is that fair for us to be like? I don't know what the right way to word it is, but
I see what you're saying, because I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
What you accept is what becomes real. So society's been saying this is what masculinity is. That's what masculinity is. And that's changing. Like I said before, there's nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home dad. I don't think that makes you any less masculine. You can provide in other ways than monetarily. You know what I mean? And so there's a lot of things that were accepted back then that I disagree with that were coined as masculine. But like I said, I think that comes from a misunderstanding of what masculinity is. It doesn't mean you make more money.
So what does it mean to be masculine then?
That is a very in-depth question, and we have a whole episode on that, right? Or maybe not. Maybe
we went into if it's okay to cry, but I feel like we have to differentiate. What should be masculine and then what's toxic? How do we differentiate them? Is the question I'm asking. Because we have
differentiate between what's toxic masculinity and what's actual masculinity.
Yeah. Like how do we just get rid of toxic and the masculinity? That's what I'm saying. So you have toxic masculinity, right? How do I separate the toxic from the masculinity? So my masculinity is something I can wear proudly, and then the toxic isn't seen as toxic masculinity. It's just seen as toxic.
That takes me back to square one, because to differentiate between the two, you need to understand what masculinity really is, and we can get into that right now.
And lying me, Nostradamus.
No shit. All right. Masculinity, in my opinion, this is the opinion factory again, once again.
You about to say some crazy shit. I can already tell, bro.
No. I don't think so. But I know there's going to be people who disagree with me.
Yeah, that's fair.
Masculinity is not entitlement to authority. Masculinity is the desire to better yourself, to better your family's life, to protect. Masculinity is drive, it's ambition, it's a go-getter attitude, it's strength.
You see, I like all those things you're saying, right? But what happens when you have too much masculinity, though? I feel like that's where this toxic came from.
Too ambitious?
Yeah, or
Too
you're
protective?
too much of
Well,
a
yeah, you
go.
can be too
You're too
protective.
much of
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You're
Mhm.
too protective, or you're too
I
much of
get
a
that. I
go
get that.
getter. Like, oh,
Uh-huh.
you want to be the guy. You want to get the baddest girl in the room. Like, oh, go talk to her. She says no. Oh, I'm gonna be a go getter. I'm gonna go. Like, you know what I'm saying? Then it
All
becomes
right.
like now it's kind
All
of a
right.
you
Too
know.
much of anything is a bad thing, bro.
But maybe that's where maybe that's like what it means right now. I feel like that's what it means right now. Like people really argue about men can't express their emotions, men harass them, and like men the way men talk about women amongst themselves is like toxic. You know, it's not good. Like if we're talking, right, I'm like, oh, this girl's bad, that oh she had a fat ass, right? They're gonna be like, that's toxic. Whereas us,
That's
we
Hold on,
just be
hold
like,
on. Can you explain to me why that's toxic to say that this woman has
because
a trait that you find attractive?
you're objectifying them. That's what.
Oh, so if a woman was like, yo, he has such beautiful blue eyes, that's toxic femininity because now she's objectifying him, right?
Can you objectify eyes though?
Can you
As a
objectify an ass? You just said she has a fat ass, and then now it means you're objectifying her,
listen, man,
right?
I'm just giving you the. I mean, in theory, ass is more objectified than eyes, though, right?
It's
Like,
just in our society, maybe, but if you go to, I don't know,
yeah, we're
the
talking about
Middle
America.
East,
Let's talk
where
about America. Let's
all you see is all
we're
you
talking
see
about
is the
America.
eyes. What else do you have to go on?
No, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're talking about America, Western society. All right. So if you do that, that's where I can see maybe they like have a leg to stand on, right? Because I'm like, oh, now you're objectifying women. That's why it's toxic, you know. And like we
Too
should not be
much
talking
of
about. We should
yes,
not be talking about. Like we shouldn't be having locker room talk, right?
man.
That's what I'm
Saying
talking about,
that
right? Like I can't talk about grab a woman by
no, no,
grab a
no,
woman
no,
by
no,
this.
no.
Like that's
Well,
okay.
yes,
Right.
but saying that ambition or protectiveness is masculinity, that's not the same as saying overprotectiveness is masculinity.
It's not, but the way it's pushed, where it's like if you do more of it, you'll be the guy. Then that's where it seems like, oh, he just thinks he's being masculine. Now it's
That's
toxic
a good point
masculinity.
because I see what. So you're saying that
Like
a
if I
lot of
was
people
it,
do these things because they think it'll make them more of
yeah.
a man,
But
and so
look at the gym guys that don't work out necessarily for like the gym, but they like to feel better about themselves, but they feel like it will get them more girls, right? And they work out to the point where they look like, where they just look like mad disfigured, right? They're freaking like 600 pounds of upper body and their biceps are the size of your head. And then they have like maybe like scrawny legs or whatever because they see in the movies, oh, they're flexing and the girls
right,
want guys with muscles, like arm
right.
muscles.
Is that toxic?
I would argue it's insecure. But the thing is,
Right,
when you see that image, you're just gonna associate that with masculinity. And
and
then
that's where we start.
and then when that happens too much, you're gonna just call it toxic masculinity because the idea it came from is masculinity itself.
No, it's insecurity. It has nothing to do with It has nothing to do with actual masculinity. It came with the wrong idea of it. That's why I don't like this term. Like why tangent? Why is there no such thing as toxic femininity?
Because women are perfect.
Because we understand that if they overly do something that is seen as a stereotypically feminine trait, it's not really feminine no more. It's something else. It's insecure. It's crazy. It's whatever else we call women who do whatever they do.
You know what they call them.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't call them toxic femininity. We don't call it that.
I see. But
Because
is the fact we call them something else toxic though? You know?
Well, I mean that's a good point because
Because
when we call this toxic masculinity, we kind of overshadowing the actual conditions that encourages this behavior, which is not masculinity itself.
you see, the thing is when we call women like if I was to call it like a woman a bitch, right? We're still tying that to her feminine trait though.
I be
Like
calling
her
guys
being
bitches.
man, you know how it goes though, man. Most of the time, it's women being called bitch, right? And if they're being called bitches, we're also
That's universal at this point.
yeah, and we're also just tying that. I mean, man, whatever. Anyways, we're tying that to them also being a woman, though. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So, like, even when you call a dude a bitch, you're kind of saying he's being a woman in a negative
Yeah,
way.
or you like call him like you call him like a pussy or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I feel like even like there's no toxic femininity because you just call them like bitches. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like that's how it works.
And so because we have that word for them,
Like,
we
is it?
recognize that there's no such thing as toxic femininity.
Yeah, I feel like that's yeah. I kind of feel like that's how it.
So calling someone, so saying, so toxic masculinity is the male version of a bitch.
Not to the same like exact degree, but yeah, that's like what kind it is. Like I'm attacking you for being in this manly way, and you're like overdoing it, or it's just detrimental. You know, like if a woman was just like I don't know, if a woman just did something that's associated with women but are negative, you just call them a bitch. Not saying I would. I don't
I'm
use
not
that.
saying I would either.
I don't use yeah,
feel kind
but
of
like
attacked right now.
but just in general,
Right.
like in our society, people would do that though.
And so, all right. So here's the thing. We call this toxic masculinity. Your question was, how do we rectify this? How do you rectify something called toxic masculinity?
I'll be masculine.
How do you do it?
Um,
Do you take away the masculinity part? Okay, let's say you take away the toxic
Yo,
part.
2025, no more gender rules.
You take away, hell no. You take away the toxic part, and you're just left with masculinity. So there's this guy who's really, really overprotective, and that's his toxic masculinity. That's his toxic masculine trait. So you say, hey, if you want to be masculine without the toxic, take away this protectiveness. What did you just take away?
I don't know, man.
The toxic part or the masculine part?
Well, if it's both, can it only be
You
one?
did take away both, but why? Why? And that's the problem. Why not say, yo, you were raised in really messed up society and really messed up family?
But that's everybody though. If that's a large amount of people, then it's gonna be a societal flaw though. So you're gonna be like, okay, now these men are toxic. It's toxic masculinity, right? If that was the case.
Wait, say that again.
Since it's a large number of people in this society, right? Since it's a society thing, you're not gonna call it society. You can call it a societal flaw, but you're just gonna say, oh, all these men are toxic, or it's toxic masculinity.
Right, but you're saying that, but what's the actual issue? It's not masculinity. That's what I'm gonna keep going back to. You're saying this is toxic. That's what society is saying. I get what you're saying. Society is saying it's toxic masculinity. Does that mean that's what it actually is? That's what they accept it to be. That's the reality for a lot of people in their heads. But is that what it actually is? It's not the way that we're actually going to solve this by telling men, don't be protective.
Is that what these people are saying though, or is it just? I feel like when I hear that stuff, it's just like, yo, it's okay to show your emotions, and it's okay to cry. I feel like
because a lot of people attribute
stop
violence,
stop hitting
and sexual harassment to it.
Yeah, like stop hitting your wife and stop hollering at every girl.
Well, that's not masculine. How are you gonna?
But
how are you attributing that to masculinity?
Because if you're masculine, you get female. That's how it's viewed, fam. Like think about it, fam. When you were growing up, bro, is it wrong?
Yes.
So a masculine guy, like him getting females, has nothing to do with him being masculine.
No. Him hollering at every female he sees doesn't make him masculine. Him grabbing the ass of every ass that he finds is nice doesn't make him masculine. Him abusing his position of power doesn't make him masculine. Him threatening every guy at the bar so that he can beat up his chest and say, yeah, I'm so tough, doesn't make him masculine. That's what people have been saying, but that's all insecurity. These are all psychological problems, and they're not inherent to masculinity at all.
But if more men seem to have it, though, aren't you going to associate that with men and masculinity, though? Like, if this is a problem that you see majority men have, you're going to associate that problem with men. Like, let's look at the school shooter thing, right?
Well, yeah.
Most school shooters are young white men. So now you're going to associate that problem with young white men. So you're not going to associate that with, it's a regular trait that both men and women have that are both a fatal flaw, but it's only a fatal flaw in young men.
So here's how I'm thinking about this. There is this societal programming that has been negatively affecting men for a very long time.
What's that?
The idea that in order to be a man, you have to do all those things that you just mentioned. You have to be the loudest, most dominant, most aggressive, most persistent, whatever, right? And this programming has been targeting men specifically.
Okay.
Men have, I would say, lost sight of what it means to actually be a man. And so just because this programming has been affecting men specifically doesn't mean the problem is with men themselves inherently. Like, I'm thinking about it, like, think about the coronavirus right now. It's something that specifically targets older people, people with respiratory diseases, whatever. That's who it specifically targets. Yeah. When you think about the coronavirus deaths, that's who the deaths usually belong to, as far as I know. Uh-huh. Do we have is being old a problem? Is having a respiratory disease inherently bad? Does that make you a bad person inherently?
I see what you're getting at, but I don't know if that's a fair comparison.
I'm not saying it's the exact same. I'm comparing the ideas. There's something that targets a specific demographic. And now, on one hand, we have that demographic now, I don't know, being defined by that, right?
Okay.
And on the other hand, we recognize that they're being targeted, they're being affected, but, you know, it's not part of who they are or who they're supposed to be.
Oh, man.
Yeah, and this is kind of making men out to be victims. And I don't want to say, oh, woe is me, woe is men. We've had it so rough. You know what I mean? But I don't want to say masculinity, you know, is the problem here.
Well, why can't it just be a toxic version of masculinity, though? If you have the masculine stuff, right? You have your provider and your all this type of stuff. Can't there just be a bad version of all that type of stuff?
A bad version of being protective, being overprotective?
Yeah.
Well, why can't you just say he's overprotective? Why do you have to say, well, that's toxic masculinity?
Because you're still doing the masculine thing. It's just a bad version of that masculine thing you're doing.
No, you're doing something that's bad. Being overprotective isn't a masculine thing. You're doing something that's bad.
It's not, but we're just using the overprotective stance. If being overprotective or being the dominant one is the masculine thing to do, right? And then you do a bad version of that masculine version, isn't it? You doing the bad thing of
no. Look at this. So women, they enjoy bonding. Fair to say, on average.
Everyone enjoys
typically
bonding.
Women prioritize bonding. All right. Shoot me for saying it.
Men have
crucify me for saying it. I just said it. All right. So you have this girl now, and she's ridiculously clingy.
Okay.
Are you saying, yo, this is the toxic version of your feminine traits?
No, but you can associate that with females, though.
Men can be clingy.
Man, who is usually more clingy?
And even if you do associate it with females, are we saying this is toxic femininity? Are we saying that, you know,
no, but you can attribute to females, though. You're just gonna be like, oh, it's like a bad version of this woman or something.
Do people really think that? I know I never do. This is a genuine question.
Like if you have a clingy female, right? You're just gonna be like, oh no, this is
clingy woman. I'm sorry, I apologize. Female is a bad word. 2020, man. Get with the times.
I'm done with this episode. Turn this shit off. I ain't doing this, man. I ain't doing this. All right, man. I'm trying to be the good guy. All right, you have a clingy woman,
right,
or female, and then she's like, you're gonna associate that clinginess with them being a woman.
That's it. I'm asking if that's true.
Yeah, I personally don't. I feel like most people don't feel like men are like necessarily like clingy.
I can
I
can point you to.
There's definitely. I'm not saying
most of the women that I know.
Yeah,
who've been on dates, and like after like one date or like one hookup, like this dude can't stop blowing up her phone.
Is that clinginess though?
Is that clinginess? He won't leave her alone.
I don't know.
He wants to get with her all the time.
No, I feel like that's the goal getter.
When can I see you again?
I feel like that's something different though. I feel like that's the goal. Like I'm trying to like keep hollering at this girl that I may have got lucky with once.
What is clinginess? Isn't that
clinginess is like clinginess is like that to an extent. That's clinginess, but it's like that also that person that you're like with, like say it's your girl or whatever, and they just can't leave you alone, or like, oh, I miss you all day, or like that type of stuff though, right? so you have a friend that just won't stop hitting you up. Like that would be like the clinginess thing. Right? They just can't leave you alone.
Like
and y'all are still clean. But I feel like you associate that cleanness more with females though. That's what I'm saying.
Maybe people do. I'm not gonna speak for people. You could be right. You could be right. Maybe people do. Is that right? Is that like a toxic version of being feminine, or is that just a bad thing that people do? Because women can be overprotective.
So of course,
women can be very aggressive.
So you're arguing. So I just want to make sure I have it clear. Your thing is that masculinity is inherently a good thing, and the bad versions of masculinity should just be viewed as bad things and not
as bad things, as not connected to masculinity. Because I could be just speaking for myself here, because like you said, people seem to believe that the toxic version of femininity is still associated with femininity, when for me personally, I never thought if a woman is clingy, it has to do with her being a woman. I thought it had to do with her upbringing.
Clingy is just an example.
Right. But like, then I would look at someone who's clingy as someone who has abandonment issues. Nothing to do with femininity at all.
Fair.
That's what I would think about it as. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I would like people to think.
But what if a lot of women had that problem though?
They probably do. Like abandonment issues? I don't know. I haven't done any studies on it.
Yeah, but if a lot of women had that problems and they were doing things that were detrimental by being clingy, then naturally over time you would associate that thing with women. No?
I would say your femininity is not a bad thing. I would look at how to deal with abandonment issues. I will not say be a better woman.
You know, man.
You know what I mean?
You're a good guy, man. You give people the benefit of the doubt. You're a good guy.
I try.
Toxic
I
masculinity.
don't think I'm going to be seen as a good guy after this episode, but I try.
Toxic masculinity, I don't think it's people the benefit of the doubt. This associates that bad thing they're doing with their masculinity.
Automatically.
But when you look at the movies, they do have a leg to stand on. That's what I'm saying. You look at all the movies, all the high school shows. They have a leg to stand on.
That's the conditioning I'm talking about.
If you were conditioned to be a way and then you end up being that way.
You look at the conditioning. You look at the conditions that made you be this way. You look at the abandonment issues. You look at the programming.
But then if that's one demographic that became conditioned to become that way, does that demographic not become the condition?
I think we need a woman.
All right, man. We'll have a follow-up episode.
I think we need a woman, bro.
Hey, man. Oh, you might be right.
Well, let us know what you guys think. Toxic masculinity. How would you define it? Do you subscribe to it? Is it real to you? You already know it's not real to me.
Yeah. Hey,
I would like people to become more educated on what masculinity actually is. That's my thing. I feel like once we do that, and once we recognize where these problems are actually coming from, we can actually start addressing it, and then these toxic masculinity problems will start fading. Personally, that's what I believe.
I'm on the fence, man. As long as it's a good argument, I might be able to give you some leeway. But anyways, let us know what you think.
Factory Podcast.
Comment down below.
Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you see a podcast. Yep. If you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the video, like the video, drop a comment. Helps a lot. Takes 2 seconds. Yes. And
share with your friends. Let them know. I know you have that one friend that's always talking about this type of stuff. So let them know if they can educate us, please. What we miss.
Especially me. All right. We're going to see you guys next week.